It's such strange times we're in, a bit like a phony peace, as we look around us at the desolation of the aftermath of the greatest war ever mounted against the whole of humanity. The graph you can see on the screen is the trauma curve. It was designed by the Swiss psychologist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross to describe the journey a person takes when they're beginning the long and slow road back to recovery after suffering from a great trauma, like a war. Of course, even she would never have imagined that the war would be of governments against their own people. So I imagine the sense of betrayal makes the trauma go much deeper. I say I imagine because ever since I discovered how they protected Jimmy Savile, I always knew they were capable of it, and more, much more. But even from my position in the gutter, where nobody cares what I say and nobody is listening, I can see most people have barely made it out of the shock stage yet to even get to denial. They are still resonating with the impact of the attack on them, their families, and their way of life. Their heads, to me, are like those of cartoon characters after they've just been hit by a cast iron frying pan, going wah, 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 and encircled by spinning planets and moons. Determined as they are to go back to work so that they can go back to normal, they appear to be swimming upstream in slow motion against a current that's continually threatening to sweep them away, and at some level they know it. Their subconscious minds are shouting at them from the banks, warning of the rocks and white water rapids ahead, but they're only listening to their conscious minds, which are all repeating the same mantra on a loop: business as usual, business as usual, business as usual. However, even those who are still wearing their masks and getting their shots, they know when they wake in the middle of the night that the most heinous crime ever has been committed against humanity in their lifetime. In the morning they awake with a sense of foreboding which they try to push away over their coffee and toast. But as they go about their business, they are cowed and they are bowed under the weight of the shock and the denial. Because that knowledge is creating such a chasm between what they want to be true and what is actually true, they are making mistakes, they are walking into walls, they are banging their heads and they're stubbing their toes. The more they try to get back to normal, the more it seems to them they can't. And this is leading to the frustration and depression which mark the next stages along the Kubler-Ross curve. We are all going through this curve, whether red-pilled or not, and some of us are now reaching the last few stages, which is causing the COVID theatre to unravel fast. Even so, we are now about to enter into the next phase, that of war reparations. And guess who is going to have to pay the reparations for this war against humanity? Us. It's all going to be announced in the spring budget. Our taxes and energy bills are set to double, and that's before you even get to the green taxes that make up 25% of our energy bills that amazingly Boris Johnson declared last week are still going ahead. If you weren't aware of it, it was probably because it was buried under all that Partygate stuff. But it's quite ironic that on the anniversary of Brexit, he told the people of the Red Wall, who gave him such a huge majority, that he had decided against unravelling all the red tape that kept us in alignment with the level playing field of Brussels, because it would affect our green credentials. You'd think he had some sort of death wish. No sooner than had Sue Gray's update let him off the hook with the lockdown parties and a police investigation effectively threw it into the long grass, he instantly went and stepped straight in it again. However, I think there could be a method in his madness. Maybe it was because he'd announced to the Commons only a week or so before that Britain wouldn't be going along with COVID passports, effectively throwing away the key to the whole operation of the Great Reset. So perhaps he didn't dare antagonise them further by removing one of the three pillars holding up their crumbling Tower of Babel, the environment. Just quickly, in case you don't know, the mark of the beast of the Great Reset comes under the three pillars of E, S and G. No business, small or large, can get a loan from the bank unless they meet the requirements of these three pillars. E stands for environment, and that's basically the so-called climate change emergency. S is all about social justice, i.e. woke anti-white, anti-police, etc. And G stands for governance, which means having more women and non-whites on your board of directors. These are the people who call us sexists and racists. However, the Great Reset is failing, or it's running late or something. They were trying to sell it as fairer than capitalism, like a form of socialism, but now they're admitting that it is actually capitalism, just a different sort of capitalism called stakeholder capitalism. To my mind, it's no improvement, and in fact, it's worse, much worse, because it gives no breathing space for the middle classes and small to medium-sized businesses. Huge conglomerates of the unelected, like BlackRock and Vanguard, will rule the world. They already do to some extent. Remember the other day when Neil Young threatened to remove his music from Spotify and as Joe Rogan was censored? Well, guess who owns half the rights to Neil Young's music? BlackRock. They own Neil Young. Yeah, keep on rocking in the free world, Neil. If the Great Reset should go ahead, then the new self-appointed masters of the universe will be an even smaller elite than ever, and that means there will be more of the poor than ever before. But stakeholder capitalists seem aptly named, if only because it's all the usual Transylvanian bloodsuckers who could only be dispatched by a stake through the heart. Their original plan was to make data the new gold standard, by which I mean information gleaned about you and me from their spying on us online. That's what they call data, and it's gold dust to them. Pinned against that new data gold standard was to have been a basket of currencies based on carbon credits. However, they've been unable to get Russia and China to play ball with them on the pillar of the environment and climate change and all of that, and that's probably largely what's fueling the beating of their drums of war against those two countries. If push comes to shove, I'm sure you realise that our side will lose, and lose badly. But it won't matter to those we've entrusted through the ballot box with taking care of our best interests. They can just declare another emergency upon which to justify even more ridiculously draconian legislation. And after that, there will be lots of lovely jubbly war reparations for the stakeholder capitalists to suck up into their blood banks. They think that's what's going to happen anyway, but I'm not so sure they'll be able to fit all that in before they're dragged off through Traitor's Gate to the Tower. I say that because the dike of the media wall now has so many holes in it, no amount of Dutch Peters could plug it up again. Our heroes are breaking through it, like the 50,000 truckers in Canada who forced Trudeau into hiding, and the 100,000 nurses and doctors here whose enormous courage in being prepared to lose their jobs impelled our government to rethink mandatory vaccines for health workers. I came across more of these great people of integrity last week. My heart was warmed anew when listening to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book, Fauci, on Audible, which I thoroughly recommend. In fact, a friend had recommended the book to me last week, and at first I didn't want to listen to it. I already knew the bare bones outline of what this psychopath had done to the people of the world, and I didn't think I could bear to hear any more about him. However, Kennedy does an excellent job in putting muscles and flesh on those bones, and so I glean much more about all the scientists you never usually get to hear about. In fact, there's been a huge groundswell of medical professionals fighting back against this gargantuan crime against humanity. Kennedy reports in full the written records of verbatim conversations in which the good guys are trying to persuade the peer reviewers of the extensive data that proves the efficacy of therapeutics like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. You can almost hear these reviewers squirming and the wailing of gnashing of teeth as they descend into a self-made Hades on their ums and ers, struggling to find the right weasel words to excuse them from acting to save the lives of hundreds of thousands of people across the world. It's all on the record, and one day they will pay for it, each and every single one of them. I'm not sure what form their comeuppance will come in, whether it will be that of a Nuremberg-style trial at the International Court at The Hague. But even if they escape the courts, they will have to carry that huge burden of guilt for the rest of their lives as they furtively dodge around in the shadows, trying to hide their involvement. They will not and cannot escape it, even if only in their worst nightmares. There will be a reckoning, a change is going to come, and it will come when all those whose heads are currently going, wah, 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 move further along Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's trauma curve, and then they will look all around them at the desolation, and they will want to know who did it. You've been listening to me, Annie Delaver, bag lady shouting at the traffic. If you'd like to support my work, I'm on Patreon as Shaman of Avalon. Thank you.